There is a video of an armed robbery in progress inside a church. It is still online. The man at the pulpit is Bishop Lamor Whitehead. It is Sunday, July 24th, 2022. There are about 20 people in the room. The camera is running a live stream. That detail matters. It means what happens next is not a police reconstruction and not a reenactment. It is the event itself in real time from one fixed angle. 3 men come through the doors with guns. They put him on the floor. His wife is beside him. Their infant daughter is in the room. Then they take the jewelry off his body. Around $1 million of it, by his own accounting, including a Cuban link chain he valued at $399,000 and a Rolex at $75,000. It takes under a minute. Then they're gone. The clip went everywhere. Cable news, every tabloid in New York, millions of views inside a week. And that is the part almost everybody remembers about this man. Here is the part almost nobody remembers. All that attention did something the 3 men with the guns never intended. It walked federal investigators straight into his finances. And what investigators found there was another victim, not a millionaire, not insured. Her money was already gone, 20 months before those 3 men ever touched that door. She was a retired nurse in her 50s. She had one asset left in the world, about a decade of retirement savings. And she handed all of it to the man at that pulpit in a single cashier's check, $90,015. That is the number this story is actually about. Lamor Whitehead was convicted by a federal jury in March 2024 and sentenced to 9 years in prison. He has maintained his innocence, and his lawyer announced an appeal. Everything in this video comes from the public record of that case. And the detail that sat in that courtroom worst of all was not the money. It was a text message he sent to her son, 6 months after the money disappeared. We'll get to it. To understand what happened to her savings, you have to understand what she was looking at. The press called him the Bling Bishop. He did not fight the name. He wore Gucci to court, a ruby ring, a diamond watch. He rode in a white Rolls Royce. He lived in a 6,000 square foot house in Paramus, New Jersey, a property reported by New Jersey outlets and by Patch to be worth well over $1 million on a street with no visible connection to a small church in Brooklyn. Because the church was small, leaders of Tomorrow International Ministries sat in Canarsie, in a working neighborhood in the far southeast corner of Brooklyn. On the morning of the robbery, the room held roughly 20 people. That gap, 20 people in the pews, a Rolls Royce at the curb, is not an accident of this story. In this particular corner of American religion, it is the advertisement. It is usually called the prosperity gospel. The teaching is that faith expressed through giving produces material return. You sow a seed. God multiplies it. Your giving is not a cost you absorb. It is an investment you make. Follow that logic all the way down and something strange happens to the preacher's wealth. The jewelry stops being a red flag. The jewelry becomes the proof. He is not taking from you. He is demonstrating the return. He is the before and after photograph, walking. And he had one more credential that nobody in that room could have manufactured. He was a friend of Eric Adams, the sitting mayor of the city of New York, a friendship that dated back to 2013. Be precise here, because this matters. Eric Adams was never accused of any wrongdoing in this case. He is not a defendant in this story. The friendship was real, and photographs of the two of them are real. What federal prosecutors would eventually argue was that Whitehead sold that real friendship as something it was not, as leverage, as access he could rent out. So picture the whole package as a parishioner would have seen it in 2020. A pastor, a mansion, a Rolls Royce, the mayor's phone number, and a promise that God had already done for him what God was about to do for you. There is exactly one thing in that picture the congregation was not looking at closely: the date the ministry was founded. Leaders of Tomorrow International Ministries was founded in 2013. Whitehead was released from prison in 2013. Before he was a bishop, he was an inmate. He served roughly 5 years for identity theft and grand larceny, in a case that began with his arrest in the mid-2000s. The underlying scheme, as reported by the Seattle Times and other outlets reviewing his record, involved identities taken from dozens of victims and used to obtain more than $2 million in fraudulent loans and vehicles. Cars bought in other people's names, loans opened against other people's credit. Over 50 victims across state lines. Whitehead has always disputed that conviction. He has publicly described it as an unjust and illegal conviction, and he has said the years he served are precisely what qualified him to lead. And in fairness, that is one of the oldest and most genuine stories in American faith. The man who fell, who paid, who came back to warn everyone else. Congregations have been built on that testimony for 200 years. But notice what it also does structurally. It converts a criminal record from a warning label into a credential. It makes the receipt part of the sermon. And it is worth holding the shape of that earlier case in your head because the shape does not change. More than 50 people. More than $2 million. Documents that said one thing while the reality said another. 5 years served. Everything that would later be charged in a federal courthouse in Manhattan already existed, in miniature, before the ministry did. Because none of this was hidden. It was in the public record the entire time. The tabloids printed it. It was one search away. Which is the thing that makes affinity fraud different from every other kind. A congregation is not a group of people who failed to check. It is a group of people who have agreed on purpose that checking is not what they do here. Trust is not a weakness in that room. Trust is the whole product. And in late 2020, a woman in that room decided to act on it. Her name is Pauline Anderson. She had spent a career as a nurse. By 2020, she had stopped working, and what she had to show for that career was a retirement account. That account was functionally her entire future. No pension coming, no salary, no second income behind it. Just a number on a statement that had to last the rest of her life. What she wanted was a house, something modest, a fixer-upper she could own outright and repair over time. According to her testimony in Manhattan federal court, Whitehead told her he could get her there. The structure he proposed was this. She would liquidate the retirement account. He would invest that money through a company he controlled. The proceeds from that investment would buy her the house and pay for the renovation. And in the meantime, while she had no income of any kind, he would pay her $100 a month to live on. $100 a month. That was the arrangement she was asked to accept in exchange for everything she had. And run the arithmetic on that, because nobody in that room did. $100 a month is $1,200 a year. Set that against $90,015 and you get 75 years. 75 years to be handed back her own savings at the rate she was offered. And that is the generous reading. That is the deal working exactly the way it was described to her. She agreed. In late 2020, she liquidated the account, and the money came out as a single cashier's check, $90,015. The handoff, per her testimony, happened at church. She asked her son, Rashid, to give it to him at Sunday service. Prosecutors at trial showed the jury the check itself, with Whitehead's signature endorsed on the back. That document is why this case is not a matter of one person's word against another's. Where did the money go? Not into an investment, not into a house. According to the Justice Department, he spent it on luxury goods and personal expenses. Luxury clothing at Louis Vuitton, purchases at Foot Locker, and the detail that reporters kept repeating because it lands, he used her retirement savings to make his own car payments. A nurse's retirement converted into a monthly payment on a luxury vehicle. Then came the part that federal juries tend to convict on. Not the taking. The after. She asked for her money back. And according to the government's case, he kept lying to avoid returning it. The excuses changed. The money did not come. At one point, per reporting on the case, the position became that her $90,000 had never been an investment at all. It had been a non-refundable contribution. And then there is the message. More than 6 months after the money was gone, Whitehead texted her son. Pauline Anderson described it from the witness stand. She testified that he was berating Rashid in that text, and that he was, in her words, basically asking God to exact vengeance on him. Read that twice. The family asks for the retirement savings back. The response invokes the authority of God against the son who asked. That is the loop opened at the top of this video, and it is now closed. But the timeline is not, and the timeline is where this gets worse. Her money disappeared in late 2020. The robbery that made him famous happened in July 2022, 20 months apart. So when the world watched $1 million in jewelry come off a man's body and felt something, sympathy, shock, whatever it was, a nurse in Brooklyn had already been waiting nearly 2 years for $90,000 that was never coming back. She was not the only one. The federal indictment describes a second track running at the same time, and this one aimed higher. Brandon Belmonte was a businessman, an auto body shop owner. Prosecutors said Whitehead took $5,000 from him first. $5,000 is not the crime. $5,000 is the qualifying round. A small ask tests two things at once. It tells you whether the person will pay, and, more usefully, it tells you whether they will keep paying quietly once the story starts to wobble. Because what came next, according to the government, was an attempt to get Belmonte to lend him $500,000 and hand him a stake in real estate transactions, in exchange for favorable actions from the mayor of New York City, $500,000 and a piece of the deals against the promise of City Hall. And here is the government's actual charge, which is worth stating precisely. Prosecutors said Whitehead knew he could not deliver. He was not selling influence he had, he was selling influence he did not have, which is why, again, Eric Adams is not accused of wrongdoing here. The case was that his name was being used as collateral by a man who had his phone number and nothing else. The government charged it as attempted extortion, alleging Whitehead used threats in pursuit of the money. A jury would later agree. And there is a third track, which is the one that shows the method most clearly. It starts in 2018, before either of the other two. Prosecutors said Whitehead altered bank records to make it appear that a limited liability company he controlled held an average balance of more than $2 million. The actual balance in that account was under $10. Over $2 million on paper. Under $10 in reality. The purpose, per the government, was to obtain financing on the Paramus property. And a loan application of $250,000 was supported with fabricated statements. That is the house. That is how the mansion in the picture at the top of this video connects to the fraud. And when federal agents came to ask him about all of it, he lied to them about something almost small. His phones. That became a separate federal count on its own. 2 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of attempted wire fraud, 1 count of attempted extortion, 1 count of making false statements to federal law enforcement. While the case was moving, the content did not stop. In a video posted in December 2023, Whitehead sat in the backseat of a Rolls-Royce, logos on the headrests behind him. He reached for the story of Leah in Genesis, the wife who was hated, and drew the line straight to himself. God saw Leah get hated on, he said, and God sees Bishop Whitehead, and you get hated on. That is the move in one sentence. The accusations are not evidence. The accusations are persecution. And persecution is how you know he is the real thing. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, there is no retirement account, no fixer-upper, no renovation, and no $100 a month. He also went on camera after the robbery and defended the jewelry directly. He was not flashy, he said. He was blessed. He had bought what he had. He walked news cameras through his own church and reenacted the heist. He performed the worst minute of his life for the press on the floor of the room where it happened. And the coverage that came back was enormous. Which raises the question people asked online immediately, so let's answer it and move on. Was the robbery real? Yes. 2 men, Pauline Anderson and Saquon Pollock, both 23, both arrested in September 2022, pleaded guilty to federal robbery charges. The third man, Shamar Leggette, 41, was killed in January 2024 during an attempt by U.S. Marshals to take him into custody in New Jersey, after authorities said he fired at them. So this is not a story about a staged crime. It is something stranger and, honestly, darker. A real crime happened to him on camera, and the footage of it made him a national story. And that story is what pulled the thread on the crimes he had already committed against people with no cameras at all. In March 2024, a jury in Manhattan federal court found Lamor Whitehead guilty on all 5 counts. Damian Williams, then the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, put it in one line. Whitehead, he said, is a con man who stole millions of dollars in a string of financial frauds, and even stole from one of his own parishioners. On June 17, 2024, United States District Judge Lorna G. Schofield handed down the sentence. 9 years in federal prison. 3 years of supervised release to follow, $85,000 in restitution, $95,000 in forfeiture. Sit with those two figures next to each other. $90,000 and $15 left her account. $85,000 was ordered back. And an order is not a transfer. A restitution order is a court telling a man in prison that he owes money. Whether it actually arrives, and when, is a separate story that does not make the news. Whitehead has maintained his innocence throughout. His attorney, Don Florio, said after the sentencing that they would explore all available legal avenues to ensure that justice is served and that an appeal would begin immediately. He is entitled to that appeal. He has always said the earlier state conviction was unjust as well. Those positions belong in this video, and they are his. But the jury heard the check, the endorsement, the bank records, and the witness. And they were unanimous. Here is what stays with me about this case, and it is not the guns. One of these two crimes has video. The other one has a piece of paper. $1 million leaves a man's body in 60 seconds, and the internet watches it happen. $90,000 leaves a nurse's account over 20 months, quietly, with her permission, in a building she trusted. And nobody sees anything at all. That is the actual mechanism of affinity fraud. And it is why this kind of case keeps happening in exactly this kind of room. It does not need force. It does not need a mask. It needs somewhere the asking of questions has already been quietly reclassified as a lack of faith. Federal regulators have a name for it. The Securities and Exchange Commission publishes standing investor warnings about affinity fraud. Schemes that target the members of an identifiable group and religious congregations are among the examples the government itself lists. It is not a rare or exotic crime. It is a category with its own public warning label, and it does not require the preacher to be poor at it. Whitehead's own record was public the entire time. The tabloids had printed it. It cost nothing to find. It just never got looked up because in that room he was not a man with a record. He was proof that the promise worked. Pauline Anderson wanted a small house she could fix up herself. She traded her entire working life for it and got a text message about vengeance. He got 9 years. Whether she ever gets the $85,000 is a question the sentence did not answer. So here is the one worth arguing about in the comments. If the robbery had never been live streamed, if those 3 men had walked into a church with no camera running that Sunday, does anybody ever check this man's bank records? If this is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe. There are a lot of rooms like that one, and almost none of them have footage.